Good morning, everybody. First of all, I would like to thank our California State Attorney General, Xavier Becerra, and his staff for working so closely with the City and County of San Francisco. I also want to begin by thanking our late Mayor, Ed Lee, for initiating the police reforms and for responding proactively to create a historical partnership with the California Attorney General's office. I would like to acknowledge a number of people: San Francisco's Police Chief Bill Scott, City Attorney Alicia Cabrera, Board President London Breed, Supervisor Malia Cohen, our Police Commission President Julius Turman, and the Mayor's office and the entire staff for all of their hard work to make this agreement possible. And finally, I would like to thank our community stakeholders in San Francisco for engaging with us throughout the years and pressing on the importance of these reforms. In 2016, our city grappled with a crisis seen in a lot of American cities: the dissolution of trust amongst our community here in San Francisco and of law enforcement. Responding to cries from our community for improvement, Mayor Lee reached out to our Attorney General, Lynch, and the DOJ and the City of San Francisco entered into an agreement for collaborative reforms in an effort to evaluate our police department and to get an independent analysis of how we could best serve our city. And after a thorough assessment, the DOJ presented 272 recommendations, and our city, following the commitment of Mayor Ed Lee, embraced and agreed to implement all recommendations and to work closely with the Justice Department. To date, we have implemented or started more than half of those reforms. And huge credit to our Police Chief Bill Scott and the men and women of our police department that have embraced these reforms. We have some of the best officers in our country. And we are seeing promising improvements, with use of force incidents down 18% just last year. Unfortunately, Attorney General Jeff Sessions announced late last year that the Department of Justice would no longer provide assistance or guidance to departments seeking to improve the trust between the police and the public. But under the mayorship of Ed Lee, we were determined to push forward as a city. That is why Mayor Lee turned to our state partners to push forward the reform process with the help of an independent partner. Today, we're here to announce that the California Department of Justice will evaluate and report on ongoing reforms at our San Francisco Police Department. This partnership with our Attorney General demonstrates our commitment as a city to the reform process. And it includes measures needed to assure the public it will be an unbiased and transparent process. Today marks the beginning of an ongoing and lasting chapter in our reform process, one that stays true to our goal of transparency, accountability, and most importantly, of trust building here in San Francisco. Mayor Lee started us on this path, and I will continue the journey he began. Again, I want to thank our Police Chief Scott and the Police Commission for their leadership, and in particular, the men and women of our police department. And I want to close by thanking our Attorney General, Xavier Becerra, for his commitment to our city and to the reform process. His leadership here and at the state level are unparalleled, and we are incredibly happy to have him here as a partner at the table. So with that, I would like to introduce our California Attorney General, Xavier Becerra.
First, Mayor Farrell, thank you very much for bringing us together. To Chief Scott, thank you for so early on reaching out as well to see if this could be a possible course of action. And I have to tip my hat and give a shout out to Mayor Ed Lee, because from the very beginning of my tenure as Attorney General, Mayor Lee reached out to me and said, the City of San Francisco wants to be your partner. We want to continue to make improvements, and in any way that you think we can work together, I want to do that. And so when we found the U.S. COPS program under the U.S. Department of Justice abandon its work with the City of San Francisco, right away Mayor Lee and I were in conversation. And I just got to say to Ed Lee, we miss you, but we are here doing your work. This is a product of what Ed Lee wanted to see happen, and so I think it's important for us as leaders here from your city and county of San Francisco, the leader of the police department here, and certainly the city mayor, to say on behalf of all of us, I think we all owe Ed Lee a great deal of gratitude for always putting the people of San Francisco first. He said something. He said something very important when he began this undertaking, to help families in San Francisco, our men and women in uniform, believe that there could be that kind of confidence and trust that we need to do the best job at public safety. He said, fair and just policing that treats everyone the same and places the sanctity of life above all else was what was important. And I think today, that's our mission. Those of you who reached out and have been reaching out to try to help all of us come together so that families throughout the state, certainly here in San Francisco, can feel confident about the work that's being done to provide them with the public safety, should look at today's announcement as a sign that in San Francisco, they are serious about getting the job done. We need that kind of focus, and we needed this memorandum of understanding between the city and county of San Francisco, the police department in San Francisco, and the state of California through the Department of Justice to make live those reforms that were proposed by the city, more than 270 of them, and make sure that they get implemented. That is how you gain the confidence of the people of your city and your county. And I think it's important to note that simply because the federal government decided to abandon ship did not mean we were going to let that ball drop. There's some fumbles that really can cost you a whole lot. And we saw a really fascinating game yesterday at the Super Bowl. But I will tell you this, at the end of the day, the people of the city and county of San Francisco are going to be the big winners here because we picked up the ball and we're going to run with it. And we're going to do this for the people of California and San Francisco. My team at the Department of Justice stands ready to be with you as a partner. I can't tell you how important it is to have independent eyes overseeing these reforms. Accountability, transparency, confidence, and trust, they all come from giving people a sense that there will be an independent review of the work that's being done. And I believe the people of the city and county of San Francisco should be heartened that it was the leaders of the city and county of San Francisco and their police department who asked for these independent eyes to come forward. So it's all about working together. And I got to tell you, public safety is as much a team sport as anything you've seen on TV in the last 24 hours. And we have to do this together. Nothing is more important than public safety. Nothing is more important than public trust. We hope to build that public trust by working through this memorandum of understanding. And if I can send one last message to the people of this great city and county in San Francisco, this is the work that we must do. We hope that what is done here will become a model for what other communities can do. And I will tell you that the work at the Department of Justice won't end with this. In the next few months, the men and women in uniform here in San Francisco will start to employ the work that they must do now to make sure that racial and identity profiling is not something that's a reality anywhere. And we will begin to see the RIPA regulations now take effect, where all the contacts that are made of people on the streets and in our communities will be documented. And we'll be working closely with our men and women in uniform to make sure that that happens. We're going to look forward to working with the city and county of San Francisco and its law enforcement agencies to make sure that as we go about trying to document who's in a gang and who's not, that we get correct information into the Cal gang system and not incorrect information that could harm the lives of people moving forward. And so we're going to be doing a lot of work to try to give people that confidence and that trust that we in law enforcement are doing this to provide public safety. And so I am pleased to say that today's announcement is just the beginning of a process that the city and county of San Francisco began. And I hope that what we can say is it won't end with the city and county of San Francisco, that many communities will see that what you do here can be replicated elsewhere. And there begins the trust and confidence that people need, that our leaders are working in our best interest. With that, I'd like to now turn it over to your leader when it comes to law enforcement, Chief Bill Scott.
Thank you, Attorney General Becerra and Mayor Farrell. I want to start my comments off with thanks as well, and then I'm going to touch on some things that I think are very important for you all to know. But let me begin by, first of all, thanking the members of the community that are here today and those that couldn't be with us today, because really this is about policing the community with the community. And the people that you see in this room, many of them, we sit down and we have some very in-depth discussions about public safety, about keeping our city safe. When there are things that happen, whether it be violent crime or car break-ins, these are the people that we consult with, that we work with, that we partner with. But at the same time, these are the same people that are demanding a police department that's fair and just. And it's that accountability to the public and the community that really is the win that pushes our need to change where we need to change and reform our department in a way that makes us better. So let me start with my thanks for the members of the community who are always there with us, that hold us accountable, and again, they're here with us this morning, so thank you. Also, the people standing with me at the podium, Attorney General Becerra, who has been willing to work with us to get to this point, Mayor Farrell, who is continuing the work that got started by our beloved Mayor Ed Lee and got continued by Acting Mayor London Breed. And I think today is the beginning of the rest of the journey in terms of making this department a better department. Also to my left, I would be remiss without mentioning Supervisor Cohen, who, Supervisor Cohen, you know I can't forget him, who has always been a champion for reform. And when I stepped in the door here, I think one of the first things I did, even before I actually started and got sworn in, was sit down with Supervisor Cohen, and I saw her passion for having a police department that not only does its job and protects the community, but also is a fair and just police department. So she has always been a champion for police reform, so thank you for that as well. And then to the people along the wall, the teams of the Attorney General, the California Department of Justice, and then on my right, our command staff and our captains, and in the back, our president of our Police Officers Association. I can't say it any better than Attorney General Becerra. This is a team effort, a total team effort. Without everybody in this room working together, all oars going in the same direction, we cannot get this done. So this is a team effort. It's the ultimate team. It's not a sport because we're talking life and death, but it's the ultimate team adventure. So without the people in this room, none of this work can get done. And then my last thanks goes to our police commission. President Turman couldn't be here this morning. I spoke to him this morning, but his and the police commission's guidance and support is vital to our success. The police commission has a responsibility for overseeing the police department, and they take that responsibility very seriously, and we definitely appreciate all that they do to keep us going in the right direction. And also with our former president, Susie Loftus, who was the commission when I got hired, but never had the opportunity to work with her. Thank you for all that you've done to get us to this point as well. So we know that collaborative reform, that the initiative that we started with the U.S. DOJ COPS office is bearing positive results for the San Francisco Police Department and the communities that we serve. The mayor mentioned it, the 18% reduction in use of force. We have reductions in complaints. I think those are all indicators that we're going in the right direction. We are committed and focused on improving our department, and the DOJ, the California DOJ's assessment will provide an independent assessment of the work that we're doing. Now, unfortunately, when we concluded, or the U.S. Department of Justice concluded the work, they were in the process of writing the first assessment report that never got released and won't be released. So it's really important that the public sees from an independent review, an independent eye, what we are doing. I mean, it's one thing for us to report what we're doing. It's another thing for somebody totally independent to come in and assess what we're doing and report to the public. That's one of the benefits of this collaboration with the California Department of Justice. There are also other benefits, technical assistance. Part of the last agreement that we had with the U.S. Department of Justice, there was technical assistance provided. There are many areas where we need to go outside of the city and go outside of the department to call on experts, many of who have done this work before, many of who have ideas that maybe we didn't think about, and that technical assistance is a major part of a collaborative reform agreement. So with the California DOJ, with the partners that we have in place, we believe that that technical assistance will continue. We believe that it'll help us with the improvements that we know we need to make. And ultimately, our commitment is about becoming the best police department we can be. Working with our community partners, we've already accomplished a lot. Now, many people in the room are part of the work groups and the groups that have been put together to have the public input that we need to get better. We can't do this. Now, you'll hear me say that over and over again. We cannot do this without the public. I mentioned that our use of force has dropped 18% in 2017. We hope that trend continues. We expect it to continue. We also saw a 9% decrease in citizen complaints in 2017. There are several components of this initiative that will continue. One is addressing bias and how we deal with some of the disparities and disproportionalities that we see in the criminal justice system, not only here in San Francisco, but across the country. Although we can only be focused on our city, we believe we can be a model for good policing across the country. And with that, we're addressing bias. One of the things that we've done as a part of this reform initiative is our automated electronic audits of all electronic devices that are owned by the department. And that is an effort to root out bias, to identify it and root it out and deal with it if, in fact, we see instances where bias is afoot. We've also integrated procedural justice training into our continual professional development curriculum, which our officers must attend biannually. And procedural justice is a very important recommendation because it goes not only externally, it's about fairness. It also goes internally. And with the people standing on the wall, the command staff, the Police Officers Association, I think what we're all looking for is fairness. Fairness in the way we police, fairness in the way we administrate the department, and our procedural justice training will help us get there. We've also dedicated new units that really, their job is to listen to the community. We instituted a community engagement division. Our captains at our districts do a great job in doing that very thing, listening to the community, but one of the recommendations was that the department needed a more robust structure. So this process is institutionalized, and we've done that. And it's an evolution, but we've seen some very good results with this initiation of our community engagement division. We're also focused on accountability, and we're demonstrating that through the use of our body cameras. I mean, body cameras is a whole new dimension that opens up a world that before we didn't have in terms of accountability and actually transparency. I'm very proud with the work that's been done on body cameras because for a department this size to implement that policy, to implement that technology as quickly as it did is astounding in my view. And although there's always things that we can improve on, the fact that we're fully implemented in body cameras, I think it helps our department be a better department. We're also recruiting a diverse force that closely resembles the members of our diverse city. Very important. Diversity brings perspectives that we need. Perspectives from different cultures, from different religions, from different countries, from different educational backgrounds, from different levels of experience. Diversity brings perspective. Perspective brings better policing. So I'm very proud that we are moving forward in our efforts to be a diverse department. Instituting and sustaining these changes won't be easy. We know that, and we accept that challenge. The people along the wall on both sides, along with the community, we understand that it will be a challenge and it won't be easy. Change is hard. Most people don't like to change. Change is a very difficult thing, but we are committed to doing the changes that we know we need to. And it won't be an easy task, but we are committed, we are focused, and we will get it done. Out of the 16 law enforcement agencies that were once a part of the U.S. Department of Justice collaborative review process, we are proud to step forward today to continue this work. And I think we're really the first department that is taking this on in this form. So again, San Francisco leads the way. We're proud to do that, and we really think that this is going to be value added to get us where we need to go. The California Department of Justice will provide us, as I mentioned, with that technical experience and assistance to help us stay on the right track and achieve the goals that we've committed to. This agreement gives our work validation. The Attorney General mentioned it. It gives us credibility. It gives us transparency. And more importantly, this is about maintaining and building trust with the community that we serve, and we believe that this is a means to get there. Ultimately, all we want to see is the best department that we can be. We want to see less use of force. We want to see answers to some of the questions about disproportionality with those that get caught up in the criminal justice system, and we're putting measures in place to do just that. I believe that San Francisco will lead the way, and I don't say that as in a bragging matter. I say that because I'm proud that we've taken this first step to get to that leadership position in law enforcement. Our department has a long history of rising to challenges, and this is just another challenge. It's a big one, but it's just another challenge that I'm confident, and the people along this wall on both sides are confident that we will get there. So thank you all for being here, and thank you for the folks standing with me at the podium for your leadership on this matter. Thank you. And now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce the President of our Board of Supervisors, London Breed.
Thank you, everyone, for being here today. I want to thank our Attorney General Becerra for joining us in these efforts. I also want to thank our Mayor, Ed Lee, for working with Supervisor Cohen and I on the request for the State Attorney General to partner with the city to implement the 272 recommendations proposed by the Department of Justice. Issues of police reform are very personal for me. I've seen firsthand the consequences that stem from the lack of trust between communities of color and law enforcement agencies. I grew up in a community where the police were not always called when violence occurred. But that is not the future that I want for San Francisco. In the 10 years I spent as the executive director of the African American Art and Culture Complex working with young people, and my 5 years as supervisors, I've worked with the police officers in our community, specifically many incredible police officers from Northern Police Station, and I know some of our former captains who are now commanders are here today, Captain Mannix and McEachran, as well as our police, our fearless leader during the time she served as the police commission president, Susie Loftus, to work with the community on a better model for community policing. And I am so proud of the work that we did together, working with the community, working with the department, working with a lot of the folks who are here today, like Sean Richard from Brothers Against Guns, and the Healing Circle with Maddie Scott. I mean, it was an incredible effort, and I'm proud of the work we did in the Western Addition community. Our residents and our police officers all want the same thing. They want our city, our families, and our communities to be safe. This is our charge as leaders. President Obama's task force on 21st century policing recommended that the police departments proactively request investigations of use of force incidents in order to increase transparency and accountability to the communities they serve, and we have done that here in San Francisco. We continue to follow those recommendations, and 2 years ago, I, along with Supervisor Cohen, introduced a resolution calling for the Department of Justice to conduct a thorough, independent review of our police department. For me, it was important that we put San Francisco on record requesting this review through a formal action of the Board of Supervisors, but we didn't stop there. At the same time, Supervisor Cohen and I held regular hearings on police departments' use of force policies in order to have a public discussion to evaluate how training procedures could be improved to prevent escalation of violence and to ensure that we put the right policies in place to prevent these tragic incidents from ever happening to anyone else. No policy alone can ever account for every possible scenario. But the review I fought for from the Department of Justice shows that we clearly have work to do. It identifies several key areas where we need to improve, including updating our outdated use of force policies, addressing inadequate data collection, and disparities in the police stops and use of force tactics. To address these issues, the Department of Justice report included the 272 recommendations that we've been talking about here today, and as said by our chief, more than half of which we've already begun to implement. Recently, the current federal administration made it clear that these types of collaborative reform efforts between the Department of Justice and local police departments was not a priority. Under Attorney General Sessions, the Department of Justice will no longer issue audit reports or suggest reforms for local police departments. As they see it, the elimination of these collaborative reform efforts fulfills their commitment to respecting local controls and accountability. But not here in San Francisco. We won't accept that. We are not going to let this go. We're not going to stop our collaborative efforts to improve relationships between our police department and communities of color. That is why I'm so grateful that our Attorney General is working in partnership with our city. We're going to continue to do everything we can to implement those 272 recommendations, these reforms in an effective manner, and I'm committed, along with, I know, Supervisor Cohen, to doing all we can to do that. These are unprecedented times, yet I am more hopeful now than ever. Our values in San Francisco are just as important, our fight never more clear, and our role to implement these reforms never more needed. I look forward to working with Attorney General Becerra and the California Department of Justice, our chief, our police commissioners, the police officers associations, and many of the folks from our communities that are here today to implement these really important reform efforts. And thank you all so much for being here. And with that, I want to introduce my colleague on the Board of Supervisors. Supervisor Malia Cohen has been a champion on police reform efforts, including her ballot measure on police accountability that was passed overwhelmingly by voters to make sure that there are independent investigations when there is an officer-involved shooting. And so with that, I would like to introduce Supervisor Malia Cohen.
Thank you. Good morning. I know this is a heavy topic that we've come to talk about, but I just want to affirm that we all in this room come together to stand collectively for peace and justice, particularly paying attention to those members that we have lost in the community that no longer have a voice. That is the spirit that I bring to this body of work that I'm really proud of, and it's been very difficult. Today we stand before you, patting ourselves on the back for work that we've got over the line in 2018. But this work has been going on, and quite frankly, it's been going on for generations, and it's been going on unnoticed. There have been people in the communities that I represent, that President Breed represents, that have been crying out for generations for some justice, for transparency. And so today feels good because it's the culmination of all those tears, the blood that has been spilt, that we stand before you recognizing that finally policies are stepping up and catching up. I started this work really in 2015 when Mario Woods was shot and killed. And it was through a series of conversations with mothers that were grieving, with community members that wanted to do more and couldn't understand what was going on and why things were happening. So we introduced and got passed a series of legislation that created a department, the Department of Police Accountability, that's headed by Paul Henderson, formerly headed by Joyce Hicks, who was part of the initial conversation. But the one thing that was been consistent through all of this was, as a result of that pivotal moment in 2015, I had a conversation with Ed Lee. And Ed Lee listened, and he helped me, and he rolled up his sleeves, and we went to work. Now, we didn't do it alone. We could never do anything alone. Susie Loftus was president of the Police Commission at the time, and she was very instrumental in helping us get through policies that had not been touched in 20 years. Use of force policies hadn't been touched since the 90s. And fortunately, we started laying the groundwork and we started doing the work, which allows us to be here today, which allows Mayor Farrell to step in and in the death of Ed Lee to celebrate, which allows Xavier Becerra, our Attorney General, to step in the very big heels that Kamala Harris occupied. Because it was this work, quite frankly, the work of women, that brought us to where we are today. It's the mothers that remind us that we must get these murders solved. It's the mothers that remind us of why we do what we do. So I'm very pleased to see the representatives of the community here today. It's an important announcement. See, what it means is that with this memorandum of understanding, it brings us one step closer to bringing truth and transparency to heal the rifts that we have been experiencing for generations. And I know that every officer in this room, every law enforcement officer in the department always wants to do what's right and what's best. I don't have any question in that. That is why you see a decrease in officer-involved shooting, because we stopped getting complacent and we got serious. We created policies and we said we're not tolerating this anymore. That is the movement that we're here to celebrate, to talk about. So this memorandum of understanding means that we are continuing to do the work that we set out to do years ago, when nobody was paying attention, when sometimes it felt nobody cared. So, gentlemen, thank you. Chief Scott has stepped in and stepped up. But it was Greg, sir, that started this process, that came to the table. Thank you for picking up that mantle, Chief, and making sure that these 272 recommendations, and a couple hundred more if you include DA Gascon and his recommendations, all of these efforts are all to make sure that law enforcement are safe when they're policing, and that there's trust when we call the police into the community, that there will be fairness. Chief mentioned some legislation that I passed also a few years ago about counting. If we don't keep track, we don't count. We must know who's getting stopped, where they're getting stopped, for what reason are they getting stopped. Collecting this data matters because every life counts. And so we must continue to pay attention. So I will end on a very positive note. I'm exuberant. I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to be a part of this, considering I was there in the beginning. And many of you have been here from day one. And I wanted to say thank you.
So the Chief and the Attorney General will take a few questions about the collaboration. Yes.
Hi, this is for the Attorney General. What message do you think President Trump and Jeff Sessions are sending to communities, not only here but across the nation, in not wanting to pursue these kind of police reform measures?
You know, I'll let people decide what message they take from whatever's going on in D.C. I think the important message is the one you're hearing today. And especially when you hear your mama put into the mix, now you really got to get to work. And so I think all of us understand that when our mothers are watching us, we better do it right. And the only message I hope that people hear today is not one emanating from Washington, D.C. with all its dysfunction. I hope what people hear today is that we know how to make it work. We're going to do this as a partnership. And all of us, whether it's the city leaders, whether it's everyone who wears the badge, and every family that is looking for that opportunity to say that we can have confidence, the work starts here, and it's our mothers who are watching us.
Alex?
Can you outline some of the work that still needs to be done? What broadly is still in the works in these 112, as I understand it, outstanding recommendations? And does that include finalizing an agreement with the district attorney's office to take the lead in officer-involved shooting investigations?
Well, I'll start with the end of your question. So we're in the process right now of meet and confer on that MOU with officer-involved shootings. I've been here a year, and we've been in that process. The first part was negotiating language to get us to meet and confer. And we have to sit down with the Police Officers Association by rule and meet and confer on this process, because it impacts the membership of the police department. So that's in process right now, and we have to go through that. As I said, you know, what I think we all want is fairness. We can't, you know, they're the best recommendations in the world, but it has to be done fairly. So we're doing that. We're following the rules. We're doing it fairly, and then we'll see how that comes out. But it's our intention to do everything we can to implement the recommendations. To the other part of your question, in terms of what remains to be done, there's a lot of work that remains to be done. You know, accountability is one of the 5 findings that we have to work on. There is over half those recommendations still need to be implemented. The finding that we've done probably the worst, I mean, not the best in terms of, to this point, implementation on is use of force. Over half of those recommendations have been, are in the process of being implemented, and so we really are pleased with that. But there is, I mean, each category has significant recommendations. One of the recommendations is, to what Supervisor Cohen mentioned, the revising of our policies. Coming up, I think at the next Police Commission meeting, there's going to be the policy to set the stage to have a actual schedule to revise our policies in a timely manner. So, I mean, that's a huge recommendation, and that's an improvement in the department. So I think we'll be here all day if I list out everything that still needs to be done. We know we have a lot of work to do, but the point that we're trying to make here is that the Attorney General's made it, the Mayor's made it, both supervisors, and I've made it, that we're committed to doing this work, and we won't stop until it's done.
Mark, last September, or maybe October, when the DOJ announced that at the end of their collaboration, they said that they wanted to work with the police departments on 14 areas, including tactics to target gangs, drug and gun violence. You know the list better than I. Have they been doing that?
Well, yeah, it was clear that that was the focus, and there's a process to that as well. I mean, we have to, if it's funding that's involved in that, we have to apply for the funding. And so we have, at this point, have not gotten any funding for violent crime. That's one of the areas that they wanted to focus on. But we're committed to addressing those issues. And, you know, there's a lot going on there. There's a lot going on in the question you asked. But the bottom line is we are committed. We're going to use every resource available that's appropriate for us to use, and we're going to keep pushing forward.
How would you assess the DOJ's interaction with the SFPD since you took over?
Federal or California?
Federal.
Thanks for clarifying.
My initial question was about the federal DOJ. So following on that.
Yeah, no, we still have a relationship with the federal DOJ. We have to. I mean, they're in the same business that we are. And their goal is to have a safe country. Our goal is to have a safe city. So there are a lot of parallels there.
How are they working with it?
They're working with it just fine. They concluded the work. We were disappointed at that in terms of this reform. And I want to stay focused on the reform for this purpose. But we're working with them just fine. I mean, they concluded the work, and we found a way to continue it. So I think that's what's important.
You're talking about this present situation. And it's no secret, we might as well tell the truth. The Trump administration, Jeff Sessions, have rolled back all of the initiatives of Mr. Barack Obama. We still got miles to go and promises to keep before we fall asleep. And let me say finally, since we are given the historicity of the situation here, that it was on the heels of Ferguson that we had a Come to Jesus meeting at the historic Third Baptist Church. And to our former chief's credit, he was humble, he listened, and I presented to him a 21st century document that came from the Washington Bureau of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. And we cannot leave this gathering today without again repeating we owe a lot to our late Mayor Ed Lee, who met with NACP, who listened and was committed. And he was the one who looked down to Los Angeles and brought Brother Scott here. That's the truth and nothing but the truth. How we've come to this day. NACP was the agitator. Made sure we stirred up the coffee with a spoon that we'll be able to say as a Maxwell House slogan, It was good to the last drop. And that's the way it's gonna be in this department. Good to the last drop. Thank you, Chief, for stirring it up on this day.
I'll take one more question. Leanne, did you have?
I'll ask, but thank you. So does Attorney General Becerra, is there funding here involved that you will assure the city of San Francisco that these policies are all fulfilled?
The city made a commitment, and I thank the chief as well for this. The police department has made a commitment to move forward with these reforms, even in the absence of the federal cops program to oversee the reforms. The city and the police department never dropped the ball and continued forward. They're going to do these things. On my side, this is just too important not to do. And so I'm not going to wait till Sacramento, the legislature, decides to give me resources to do this. We're going to do it because the city and the chief, the mayor, the supervisors, leadership here has said they want to see this through and have that independent review continue. And so they're committed, and so we're going to be in there with them, and we'll find the resources to make it happen on our end as they are finding on their end the resources to make it happen. It's just too important not to get it done, and it should not be an excuse that you can't find the money to do right. And so we will do right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Good to see you too. Absolutely.